The company inheritance goes to blood relatives only, not outsiders, Aunt Patricia announced at our Thanksgiving dinner, her voice cutting through the warm chatter like a knife through butter. She raised her wine glass with theatrical flair, her eyes scanning the table for approval from our extended family gathered in Phoenix, Arizona. Smith Enterprises has been built by real family members, and it will stay that way. The dining room fell silent, except for the gentle clinking of silverware against china. Uncle Robert nodded approvingly from his seat at the head of the table, while my cousins Jessica and Brandon exchanged satisfied glances. Even my adoptive parents, who had brought me into this family 25 years ago, seemed uncomfortable, but said nothing. My name is Martha Collins, and at 28 years old, I had learned to navigate these family gatherings with careful composure. I smiled politely and took a sip of my sparkling cider, letting Patricia's words wash over me like water off a duck's back. What they didn't know wouldn't hurt them, at least not yet. I mean, we can't have just anyone thinking they're entitled to what we've worked so hard to build, Patricia continued, her gaze settling on me with barely concealed disdain. Some people need to understand their place in this family. I felt the familiar sting of exclusion, but I had grown accustomed to it over the years. Being adopted into the Smith family had always come with an asterisk, a constant reminder that I wasn't quite one of them, despite sharing their name and sitting at their table every holiday. Patricia makes an excellent point, chimed in my cousin Jessica, who worked as marketing director at Smith Enterprises. The company has thrived because we keep it in the family. We understand the business in ways that outsiders simply cannot. I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering the wisdom of her words. You're absolutely right, Jessica. Family loyalty is everything in business. What they couldn't see was the quiet confidence I carried, the secret knowledge that had been growing inside me for the past 5 years, like a seed waiting for the right moment to bloom. As I listened to their self-congratulatory speeches about bloodlines and belonging, I felt a calm satisfaction, knowing that their entire world was built on foundations far more fragile than they could ever imagine. The evening ended with Patricia's final proclamation. When the time comes to discuss inheritance and succession planning, we'll make sure everything goes to the right people, real family members who have earned their place. The drive home from Phoenix to my apartment in Scottsdale gave me time to reflect on the evening's events. Patricia's words echoed in my mind, but they no longer carried the power to wound me as they once had. Instead, they served as a reminder of how much had changed since my grandmother's passing 5 years ago. My maternal grandmother, Helen Morrison, had been the one person in my life who truly understood me. She had watched from the sidelines as the Smith family treated me like a perpetual guest rather than a daughter, and she had made her displeasure known in the most practical way possible, through her will. When grandmother Helen died, she left me her entire estate, $75 million accumulated through decades of shrewd investments in real estate and technology stocks. The inheritance had been a complete shock to everyone, including me. Helen had lived modestly, and no one suspected the true extent of her wealth. Use this wisely, Martha, her letter had said. You have a brilliant mind for business, and I trust you to make decisions that honor both your intelligence and your character. At 23, I had been overwhelmed by the responsibility and the opportunity. I could have bought a mansion, traveled the world, or lived lavishly for the rest of my life. Instead, I had made a decision that would prove far more satisfying in the long run. Smith Enterprises had been struggling at the time. The manufacturing company that Patricia's grandfather had founded was facing serious financial difficulties, caught between rising costs and declining orders. The family had been desperately seeking investors, though they had been careful to keep their troubles quiet to maintain their social standing. I had approached my financial advisor, Douglas Whitman, with a proposal. I want to invest anonymously in Smith Enterprises, set up shell companies and legal trusts to hide my identity completely. Douglas had raised his eyebrows. That's a significant risk, Martha. Why would you want to help a company that might fail? Because sometimes the best investments are the ones that no one else believes in, I had replied, though my real motivation was far more complex. Through a carefully constructed network of holding companies and offshore trusts, I had invested the entire $75 million in Smith Enterprises. The injection of capital had saved the company from bankruptcy and allowed it to modernize its operations, expand its product line, and return to profitability. The family had celebrated their salvation, attributing it to their hard work and business acumen, rather than acknowledging the mysterious foreign investor who had appeared just when they needed it most. They had no idea that their savior was sitting at their Thanksgiving table, listening to them declare her unworthy of inheritance. The next morning, I sat in my home office, reviewing the quarterly reports that had arrived from Douglas's firm. The numbers told a story of remarkable success. Smith Enterprises had not only recovered from its near bankruptcy, but had grown into one of the most profitable manufacturing companies in the Southwest. My $75 million investment had grown to control 51% of the company's shares, making me the majority owner. I picked up my phone and dialed Douglas's direct line. "Good morning, Douglas. I hope you had a pleasant Thanksgiving." "Martha?" "Yes, thank you. I trust yours was enlightening?" Douglas had been managing my investments long enough to understand the family dynamics at play. "Very much so. In fact, I'm calling because I've made a decision about my Smith Enterprises holdings." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, what kind of decision?" "I want to begin the process of withdrawing my entire investment, all $75 million plus accumulated returns." The silence stretched longer this time. "Martha, are you certain? That's going to create significant financial disruption for the company. They've become dependent on that capital." "I'm completely certain. How quickly can we execute the withdrawal?" "Given the size of the investment and the legal structures we put in place, I'd estimate 30 to 60 days for a complete liquidation. But Martha, this will likely force the company into bankruptcy. Is that really what you want?" I looked out my office window at the Arizona desert landscape, where saguaro cacti stood tall and resilient, despite the harsh environment. "Sometimes, Douglas, people need to learn that they can't build their success on the backs of people they claim don't belong." "I see. And what would you like me to do with the proceeds once we've liquidated?" "I've been researching competing companies in the manufacturing sector. There's a firm called West Park Industries in Denver that's been looking for investment capital to expand operations. They've built their success on merit-based promotion and inclusive hiring practices. I think my money would be much better invested there." Douglas chuckled softly. "I have to admit, Martha, I've been wondering when you'd decide to make this move. I'll begin preparing the withdrawal documentation immediately." "Thank you, Douglas. And please make sure that when Smith Enterprises receives the withdrawal notice, they understand it's coming from their majority shareholder. I want them to know exactly who's been keeping their company afloat all these years." "Consider it done. I'll draft a letter that makes your ownership position crystal clear." After ending the call, I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Patricia and the family were about to learn a valuable lesson about the difference between being born into privilege and actually earning it. Their comfortable world of assumed inheritance and blood-based entitlement was about to crumble, and this time, I wouldn't be there to catch them when they fell. The emergency board meeting was called for the following Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. I knew about it before any of the family members did, thanks to the corporate governance documents that guaranteed my right as majority shareholder to attend all board meetings. Douglas had delivered the withdrawal notice the previous Friday afternoon, and the family had spent the weekend in frantic phone calls and desperate strategizing. I arrived at the Smith Enterprises headquarters building 30 minutes early, wearing my best navy blue business suit and carrying a leather portfolio containing copies of all the documentation proving my ownership stake. The receptionist, Kelly, greeted me with surprise. "Martha, I didn't expect to see you here today. Are you here to see someone?" "I'm here for the board meeting," I replied calmly. Kelly's confusion was evident. "But the board meeting is for executives and investors only. I don't think—" "I understand. Could you please let them know that Martha Collins has arrived and is ready to take her seat at the table?" Before Kelly could respond, Patricia burst through the lobby doors, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her face pale with stress. She was followed by Robert, Jessica, and Brandon, all looking like they hadn't slept in days. "Kelly, has anyone from Morrison Holdings called?" Patricia demanded, completely ignoring my presence. "We need to reach their representatives immediately." I cleared my throat. "Actually, Patricia, Morrison Holdings is already here." Patricia whirled around, her eyes wide with desperation. "Martha, what are you talking about? This is a crisis situation. Our biggest investor is pulling out, and we need to find them before the company collapses." "I'm aware of the situation," I said quietly. "You're aware? How could you possibly be aware? This is confidential company business." Patricia's voice rose to a near shriek. Uncle Robert stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and confusion. "Martha, this isn't the time for family games. We're facing bankruptcy because some foreign corporation has decided to destroy our company. We need all hands on deck to save Smith Enterprises." I opened my portfolio and extracted a document bearing the official seal of Morrison Holdings. "Actually, Uncle Robert, I think you'll find this situation more manageable than you imagine." Patricia snatched the document from my hands, her eyes scanning the legal text with growing disbelief. This says Morrison Holdings is... But that's impossible." "What does it say?" Jessica demanded, leaning over her mother's shoulder. Patricia's voice came out as barely a whisper. "It says Morrison Holdings is a subsidiary of Collins Family Trust, which is controlled by..." She looked up at me with horror dawning in her eyes. "Martha Collins." The lobby fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Robert's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Brandon stared at me as if I had suddenly sprouted wings. Jessica grabbed the document from her mother's trembling hands and read it again, hoping the words would somehow change. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Robert finally managed. "Martha works as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit. She drives a Honda Civic. She lives in a one-bedroom apartment." "2 bedrooms, actually," I corrected gently. "And I prefer to live modestly. It helps people show their true colors when they think you don't have anything they want." Patricia's face had gone from pale to bright red. "You're telling me that you, an adopted nobody, have been our major investor this entire time?" "Majority investor," I clarified. "I own 51% of Smith Enterprises. I have for the past 5 years." The boardroom had never felt smaller than it did that Tuesday morning as I took my seat at the head of the conference table. Patricia, Robert, Jessica, and Brandon sat across from me like defendants awaiting sentencing, while the company's attorney, David Sherman, shuffled through documents with increasingly worried expressions. "This is absolutely impossible," Patricia kept repeating, as if saying it enough times would make it true. "You can't own our company. You don't know anything about business." I opened my portfolio again and spread out 5 years' worth of quarterly reports, financial statements, and strategic recommendations that I had submitted through Douglas's firm. "Actually, Patricia, I think you'll find that I know quite a bit about this business. After all, I've been making the major financial decisions for half a decade." David Sherman looked up from his legal review. "I've verified the documentation. Miss Collins is indeed the majority shareholder of Smith Enterprises through a complex but entirely legal structure of holding companies and trusts." "But where did she get $75 million? Jessica demanded. "She can't possibly have that kind of money." "My grandmother left me her estate when she passed away 5 years ago," I explained. "She had been quite successful with her investments over the years, though she preferred to live quietly." Robert's face was turning purple with rage. "Helen Morrison? That woman left you everything. We're family. We deserve that inheritance." "Are we family, Uncle Robert?" I asked softly. "Because yesterday at Thanksgiving, I was told quite clearly that I'm an outsider who doesn't belong. I was informed that inheritance should only go to blood relatives, not people like me." Patricia slammed her hand on the table, This is blackmail. You can't destroy our company just because your feelings got hurt. I'm not destroying anything, I replied calmly. I'm simply withdrawing my investment from a company whose leadership has made it clear that I'm not welcome. Surely you can understand that I'd prefer to invest my money with people who value my contributions. Brandon spoke up for the first time, his voice cracking with panic. But Martha, if you pull out, we'll lose everything. The company will go bankrupt. We'll all lose our jobs. That's unfortunate, I acknowledged. But according to yesterday's conversation, this company belongs to blood relatives only. I'm sure you'll find a way to manage without an outsider's money. The room fell silent as the full impact of the situation sank in. Smith Enterprises had been operating on borrowed time for years, propped up by my anonymous investment. Without that financial foundation, the company would collapse within weeks. David Sherman cleared his throat nervously. Miss Collins, is there any possibility of negotiation? Perhaps we could restructure the ownership arrangement or— I'm afraid not, I interrupted. I've already identified a new investment opportunity that aligns better with my values. West Park Industries in Denver has an excellent reputation for treating all employees with respect and promoting based on merit rather than family connections. Patricia's eyes filled with tears of rage and desperation. You're destroying 3 generations of family legacy out of spite. I'm not destroying anything, Aunt Patricia. I'm simply choosing to invest my money with people who treat me as a valued partner rather than an unwelcome intruder. Isn't that what any smart businesswoman would do? The final documents were signed in Douglas's office the following Thursday afternoon. Patricia and Robert had spent the intervening days making increasingly desperate phone calls, trying to find alternative investors or convince me to reconsider. Their efforts had been unsuccessful, largely because word had spread through Phoenix's business community about their treatment of their own majority shareholder. No investor wants to work with people who don't even know who owns their company, Douglas had explained to me during one of our phone calls. It suggests a fundamental lack of competence and awareness. As I watched Douglas transfer my shares to West Park Industries, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The satisfaction came from finally standing up for myself after years of polite acceptance of their contempt. The sadness came from realizing that my adoptive family had never truly seen me as one of them, despite 25 years of trying to earn their acceptance. The transfer is complete, Douglas announced, handing me a final set of documents. West Park Industries now owns 51% of Smith Enterprises, and you own 20% of West Park Industries. Your net worth has actually increased significantly through this transaction. I smiled at the irony. By trying to exclude me from their family business, Patricia and the others had actually made me wealthier and given me a stake in a much more successful company. My phone buzzed with a text message from Patricia. Please reconsider. We can work something out. Family means everything. I showed the message to Douglas, who shook his head in amazement. After everything they said, they still don't understand what they've lost. They understand perfectly, I replied. They just thought I'd never have the power to do anything about it. That evening, I received a call from James Morrison, the CEO of West Park Industries. His voice was warm and professional as he introduced himself and explained his company's vision for the future. Miss Collins, I want you to know how excited we are to have you as a partner. Your investment will allow us to expand our operations significantly and create hundreds of new jobs. I'm looking forward to working with you, Mr. Morrison. I believe in investing in companies that value all their stakeholders. That's exactly the kind of partnership we want to build. In fact, I'd like to invite you to join our board of directors. Your business acumen and investment experience would be invaluable. After ending the call, I sat in my living room looking out at the Phoenix skyline, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 5 years ago, I had been a grieving granddaughter who inherited more money than she knew what to do with. Today, I was a successful businesswoman who had learned to value herself enough to walk away from people who didn't appreciate her worth. My phone rang again. This time it was Jessica, her voice barely audible through her tears. Martha, please. Mom's in the hospital. The stress of losing the company gave her a heart attack. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive us? I felt a pang of genuine sympathy for Patricia's medical condition, but I also knew that forgiveness and business were separate matters. I'm sorry to hear about your mother's health, Jessica. I hope she recovers quickly. But my investment decision isn't about forgiveness. It's about choosing to work with people who see me as a valuable partner, rather than an unwelcome burden. The bankruptcy filing for Smith Enterprises made the front page of the Phoenix Business Journal 2 weeks later. The headline read, "Family Manufacturing Dynasty Collapses After Alienating Majority Shareholder." The article detailed how the Smith family had unknowingly driven away their own financial backer through years of dismissive treatment. I read the article over my morning coffee, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and melancholy. The reporter had interviewed several business experts who used the Smith family's downfall as a cautionary tale about the importance of knowing who actually controls your company. "This is one of the most preventable corporate disasters I've seen in 30 years, one analyst was quoted as saying. Basic due diligence would have revealed the ownership structure, but they were so focused on family politics that they ignored fundamental business realities. My phone had been ringing constantly with interview requests from business magazines and television programs. Everyone wanted to hear the story of the adopted daughter who had secretly owned the family company for 5 years. I had declined most of the requests, preferring to let my actions speak for themselves. Douglas called that morning with an update on the final dissolution of Smith Enterprises. "The assets are being liquidated to pay creditors," he reported. "Patricia and Robert will lose their executive salaries, their company cars, and their stock options. The family's financial situation is going to change dramatically." "And the employees?" I asked. "West Park Industries has offered positions to most of the skilled workers. They'll actually be better off in the long run, working for a company with stronger financial foundations and better management practices." I felt relieved knowing that innocent employees wouldn't suffer for their boss's mistakes. 6 months later, I stood in the boardroom of West Park Industries in Denver, presenting my first quarterly report as a board member. The room was filled with people who valued expertise over bloodlines, merit over family connections. James Morrison listened intently to my analysis, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions about market trends and growth opportunities. "Your insights have been invaluable, Martha," he said after my presentation. "The Phoenix manufacturing facility is exceeding all our projections, and your recommendations for operational improvements have increased efficiency by 23%. As I drove back to my new home in Denver, a modest but comfortable house in a neighborhood where people knew me for my work rather than my family history, I reflected on how much my life had changed. I no longer had to endure holiday dinners filled with subtle insults and constant reminders of my outsider status. Instead, I spent my time with colleagues who appreciated my contributions and friends who valued my character over my bank account. My phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Even months later, she occasionally tried to contact me, alternating between apologies and accusations. This message read, "I hope you're happy now that you've destroyed everything our family built." I deleted the message without responding. Patricia still didn't understand that I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply stopped propping up their illusion of success. They had built their company on borrowed money and borrowed time, thinking their family name was sufficient to guarantee prosperity. The truth was, I had given them 5 years of financial stability that they never would have had without my investment. If they had chosen to treat me as family instead of as an intruder, we all could have prospered together. Instead, they had chosen pride over profit, prejudice over partnership. Patricia and the rest of the Smith family faced complete financial ruin when my withdrawal of $75 million forced Smith Enterprises into immediate bankruptcy, resulting in the loss of their company, family estate, and lifetime financial security within 30 days. Their reputation in the business community was destroyed when word spread that they had alienated their own controlling shareholder through petty prejudice, making them unemployable and socially ostracized in their formerly prestigious circles. Patricia lost her country club memberships, luxury car, and family home when creditors seized all assets to pay company debts, while other family members were forced to take minimum wage jobs after their executive positions disappeared with the company's collapse. The business press covered their downfall as a cautionary tale about family hubris and the importance of knowing who actually controls your company, ensuring their names would forever be associated with one of the most preventable corporate disasters in recent history. As I signed the final documents transferring my shares to West Park Industries, I understood that sometimes the most elegant revenge is simply letting prejudiced people discover the true cost of their discrimination when it destroys everything they thought they owned. And I realized that my journey from excluded outsider to respected business leader had taught me that real family isn't defined by blood, but by how people choose to treat each other when they think no one is watching.